Good morning. I'm Anita from Sunshine Sanctuary. We haven't been around quite as long as the 100 years, but we've definitely clocked over 30. As many of you know, Sunshine Sanctuary is a women's refuge based on the Sunshine Coast, and it was originally established by the Landsborough Church, wanting to help the people in their community. We do cater for women, so as I speak you'll hear me say the women are our clients, but we do acknowledge that there are some horrible cases of quite the reverse happening. We are blessed to have several units in which we house our clients, so we usually have families staying with us, and when someone arrives on the doorstep they have little to nothing with them except their children, possibly a car. We sometimes pick them up from train stations. And our team of DV professionals start out helping to feed and clothe our newcomers and then organise their paperwork. Usually there's a visit to Centrelink and court papers to sort out, and then the children need to be fed, dressed and sent to school, because most people stay with us for at least 3 months in the year, often much longer than that, so children still need to go to school. We continue to help the mum, help her to sort through the relevant paperwork, finding a new home, learning better and healthy coping strategies for the future, and getting through the next few years, because it will actually be years. Statistics recently came out that it takes an average of 7 years to come to grips with what has happened to you in your life. And in all of that, you have to remember that the children have been equally affected in different ways, but still equally, and it still lasts those 7 years. As an NGO, we don't get a lot of help from anyone, so we have to come up with our own funding. So we have this year, through a series of unfortunate circumstances, ended up with an extra op shop to help support us, which, you know, bad has turned into good. So at the moment we have an op shop in Mooloolaba, we have one in Warana, or Kawana, I get them muddled up, I'm sorry for the southern Sunshine Coasters. And we've reopened in Redcliffe in a new location this month. And we've actually reached a milestone. Back in 2012, I think, our first op shop in Ningyi was opened up. We're under the leadership of Pat Locke, who was our representative for a very long time, wonderful, hardworking lady. And we've managed to have about, I think we've just crossed $1 million in revenue to help support our refuge over those years. So we'd also like to thank all the volunteers that have worked for us over this time. And so we've done a lot of good in that time, but I'm actually not here to tell you just the good things that we've done. I kind of want to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, because we need to drop the facade that domestic and family violence does not happen in our churches. It happens in Christian homes and it happens in Adventist homes at the same rate that it does outside of a Christian setting. And it happens to church pastors' wives, it happens to Sabbath school leaders, it happens to Pathfinder leaders, it happens to the mum that comes in quietly and gets told to shush her children during the church service. We're very, very good at hiding it, because it's not something that we like to talk about. It's not the sort of thing that we like to admit is happening in our homes. Unfortunately, women's voices have limited reach in this space. We can inform, we can help identify what it is, we can help survivors move forward with their lives, but it can be quite risky to speak out and say that this person is being abusive, or this person is being disrespectful to women, or something isn't quite right. And our prayers do make a difference. I never underestimate that. That's the most powerful tool we have. But the heart of a person will only change if they see that there is something inherently wrong with what they are doing. So today, I'm really talking to the good men out there to stand up and make some noise. We need the good men to call sin by its rightful name, to stand for the right though the heavens fall. Gentlemen, for those of us who don't have a voice, please speak up. call out behaviours that are hurtful or belittling to women, that may mock or may just seem a little unkind. Not just not be a part of it, but stand up and say something about it. Study how Jesus treated women and how he exercised love and kindness towards them, because he said, "Whatever you have done for the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me." So yes, Sunshine Sanctuary does want your help. Your donations of finance, resources, and any time you wish to give to us to contribute in volunteering are gratefully accepted, and we do need more volunteers. We do rely on your prayers for the daily decisions that we have to make on behalf of our clients. And we are at the Expo Hall all week if you want to know more about what we do. But just as important to our work is the daily commitment of each person to be the hands and feet of Jesus and to boldly stand up for the right. Thank you.
If you come and work at one of these Adventist entities, there's a reason why people stick around for so long. It's because they're careful. We work as a family, because pretty much you spend 8 hours a day at work. That's your family.
My voice is heard in the actual team, so whatever I wanted, they'll always try to accommodate it and try to help me improve myself.
Here is, I think, the best thing about working in ministry. No matter what hobby or interest or skills you have, you can use it for God.
I have been nothing but supported in my whole ministry. I have never felt less than or like I couldn't do the role because of my gender.
I want to encourage everyone out there who is planning or deciding to go for it.
So make sure you check out the Adventist website to see all the job listings, and who knows, maybe we could be working together.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sharing about Sunshine Sanctuary and also Bubsy. So my name is Rose. I come from Sydney, and I'm here all week to talk about Adventist volunteers and Adventist employment. But I just want to focus on that video. Who here knows that we have an employment website? Put your hand up. Where you can find jobs within our church. Okay, so some of you don't know. So we've got a website where it encourages people to work within our entities. Like you've got aged care, you've got ACA Health, Sanitarium, Avondale University, and Vitality Works, schools, conferences, and also the division, and international work too. So tomorrow we're doing a little bit something different. Instead of a workshop, we've got a meetup. So it'll be a casual event, and our meeting point is at the Expo Hall. So I've invited some people that are entrepreneurs, people from different industries that you can meet. So it'll be a time to connect. So imagine it being like a LinkedIn, but live. So you get to meet, and drinks are on us. So we'll be mingling around here. So just for an hour so you can meet others. I've invited retirees as well, so it'd be good to get advice from them, or someone that's, just for example, that's someone that's newly retired, you can get, seek advice. So it'll be an awesome time to connect. So I hope to see you there at 2:30. That's tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm really blessed to be here. It is my privilege to introduce the speaker for today and for the rest of the week for the second workshop. But before we go that, I realized I didn't introduce myself. So for those that you don't know me, my name is Cosmin Dan Marica, and I am one of the pastors here based in Brisbane. I'm very privileged to be able to serve you. Quintin Betteridge, Pastor Quintin Betteridge, is one of our colleagues, Redcliffe Church. He's one of my mates. He's one of the cyclists. Yeah. And we are very glad to have you here. One thing about Quintin is that I listened to one of his sermons, and I was surprised at the depth of his biblical analytical tools and how much he went into the Word. So I'm looking forward for this week, and I think we are going to be blessed mightily. Thank you, Quintin.
Thank you very much. I'll grab this one. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you here. It's a privilege for me to be here and to share with you today. The topic of my talk for this week will be God in the search bar. God in the search bar. And we'll talk about what do we do when church is being dismissed, but God is still being searched. And I like the topic that we have here for this whole camp is missionary focused. I think that's the key for all of us as disciples. Just in a way of introduction, my wife, does this work? Let's see if this works. There we go. They said this would work. Let's see if this goes to the next slide. There we go. That's my wife and daughter. My wife would have loved to join us, but she is unfortunately highly pregnant. And if you've ever been pregnant, you would know that she's got 1 month to go, so she's quite uncomfortable. But it's a privilege for us. I'm originally from South Africa, and I've been in Australia since 2019. This morning when I arrived and I got on one of the buggies, the individual that was driving me said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm South Africa." It's like, I can get a little bit of a hint of South African. So I don't actually know if I'm South African or Australian. My accent is a bit all over the place. But it's a privilege to be here. I serve at Kingscliff Church. And as I serve and think about how we can do missions, I reflect on the words of Jesus, "Go therefore and make disciples." That is probably the most important commandment that has been given to us. And this week we will basically just unpack this one verse. What does it mean for us as individuals to go and be the disciples that Christ has called us to be? Henry Martin puts it this way. He says, "The Spirit of Christ is the spirit of mission." The Spirit of Christ is the spirit of mission. The nearer we get to Him, the more intentionally missionary we will become. So let me put it in a way that might be uncomfortable for you. That as Christians, all of us are called to be disciple makers. There is not a Christian that shouldn't be a disciple maker. So if you are not making disciples, you should ask yourself, what am I missing in my spiritual journey? Ellen White actually puts it this way. She says, "Many suppose that the missionary spirit, the qualification for missionary work, is a special gift or endowment bestowed upon the ministers and a few members of the church, that all others are to be mere spectators. Never was there such a greater mistake. What is she saying? She's saying all of us are to be missionaries. She continues and she says, "Every true Christian will possess a missionary spirit. For to be a Christian is to be Christ-like." To be a Christian is to be Christ-like, and to be Christ-like is to have a missionary spirit. One of the things that we'll unpack on Wednesday is this idea that as C.S. Lewis puts it, is that the whole purpose of Christianity is to make us little Christs. To be a little Christ is to act and think like Christ. And that at its heart has a missionary spirit at it. And so today we want to unpack that idea, and I want to give you this kind of metaphor that all of us are missionaries. If you think about a missionary, you think of somebody that goes to a faraway country, maybe to Papua New Guinea or Vanuatu. When we think about mission trips, where do we go to? Maybe Africa or these places. But all of us are called to be missionaries. Some of us might be called to be missionaries outside in different countries. But all of us are called to be missionaries, and some of us might be called to be missionaries right here in Australia, in our street, in our homes, in the places where we find ourselves. And so for this week, I will essentially just talk about that idea of how we can be missionaries that take the command of Christ seriously. And if we think about a missionary is somebody that goes and learns the culture of the people. A missionary's inner compass essentially has a few things. Firstly, they have conviction that Jesus is Lord of every culture. Every people group, every nation and tribe needs to hear about the gospel. And so we take that conviction seriously. The second thing is we have compassion for people. Know that they are also image bearers of Christ, even though they might look different than us, talk different language than us. Most of the time, that is not the difficult thing, to realize that Christ is Lord over all of these nations. But sometimes we forget that people in our street, people that work with us, our children or our friends, those people that might look exactly like us, they are of a different culture. And that's what we'll unpack a little bit in this seminar. The third thing that we need is courage to suffer for the sake of the gospel. being a missionary isn't easy. Being a missionary will take some sacrifice and some hard work. Fourthly, that we need to have clarity on the biblical gospel message. Meaning that when we preach, we might have to change how we communicate the gospel message, but the gospel message stays the same. The gospel message cannot be changed. It is God's message to the world. And so we do not change the message, but we change how we tailor it. And we all know this intuitively, right? If you think about church, just this last Sabbath, when you went to church, or the week before that, before Big Camp, at your local church, you have your normal sermon, but you also have a children's story. And generally, you try to connect those. The person doing the children's story would often ask the preacher, if it's not the preacher telling the story, hey, what is the topic that you are talking about? And then what do they try and do? They try and align those topics so that the sermon topic and the Bible story is exactly the same on topic. But the way that you communicate certain things to children is different than you would to the adults. So you bring it down on their level. Use words that they would understand. You would not use the word justification that you might use in a sermon. You wouldn't use that to a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old. You would explain this idea that maybe you've done something wrong and it's written on a report card and Jesus, if somebody had come and taken that away. You use analogies and stories to help communicate the same message in a way that it is translatable and understandable. The same way we would do if we were missionaries. And then the fifth thing that we need as a missionary is this idea of cultural intelligence. We need to understand the world that we are in. Now, for many years in the Western culture, if you were in Australia or in the UK or in America or in places that were Western, most people understood Christianity. Aaron Wren, an individual that has been studying the trends of Christianity, makes this point that we live now what we call in a negative world. We used to live in a positive world. When you were Christian, it used to be a thing that was positive towards you. You would find a job. You would make connections a lot easier. People valued you because they saw you as a moral individual. But then that kind of shifted to the neutral world. Whether you're a Christian or not a Christian didn't really matter that much. But now since 2010, in most Western countries, if you are Christian, that is a negative thing. They view you with suspicion. And so the cultural world, the air that we breathe in, is negatively postured towards Christianity. We need to understand that if we are to be missionaries in our culture and in our world. So in this session today, I'm just going to talk about still spiritual, just not with us. Why the church is out, but spirituality is still in. And we will see that. And so the main idea that I want to kind of communicate today is that spirituality didn't die. At this moment, I'm doing a doctoral degree in studying secularism and mission in secular, post-secular cultures. And I'll be honest, before I studied this about 3 years ago, if somebody said to me secular, I would have thought that it's atheist. If somebody said, oh, that person is a secular person, in my mind, I would have thought that is an atheistic person. A person that doesn't really care about spirituality. A materialistic person. A person that is more postured towards naturalism. But in the last 2 or 3 years, I have realized that we are more spiritual than ever before. And so what I want to talk about is this idea that spirituality didn't die, it just moved. Disaffiliation, moving away from Christianity, is rarely atheism. It is more likely just what we call remixed spirituality. Now, to set up the kind of scene today, I'm going to look at a little bit of sociological research. And you might say, oh, why do we spend our time? Let's just talk about the Bible. But we want to be intelligent Christians. We want to use the faculties that God has given us to be the most productive in the space that we are in. And so sociological research is very, very helpful. Brene Brown, a sociologist herself, writes this. She says, in the absence of data, we will always make up stories. In fact, we need to make up a story, especially when we are hurt, as a part of our primitive survival wiring. Meaning making is in our biology, and our default is often to come up with a story that makes sense, feels familiar, and offers insight into how best to self-protect. So what is she saying? She's saying oftentimes we make up stories from the stuff that we see. And so today, as Christians, we know that the census data tells us what? Christianity is declining. And so what do we make of that Christianity is declining in Australia? if we don't actually know what's going on, we might make up stories about those that are disaffiliating from Christianity, and we have an idea in our mind that that is who they are. And so when we're trying to make disciples and engage with them, we might not actually hit the mark. I would have done that a few years ago. If I thought secular means atheist, I would have think the best way to reach a secular person is to argue about, does God exist? But what if most of them actually doesn't really care if God exists? It is easier to have an argument or a conversation, spiritual conversation, with an atheist that says, I don't believe that God exists. It's a lot harder to have a conversation with an apatheist, somebody that is apatheistic towards God. I don't really care if God exists. Because they don't really care. Atheists care. That's why they kind of try and figure out if God exists or doesn't exist, right? So we want to figure that out today. So this is the census data, the last census that was taken in 2021. And as you can see there, the blue line is the decline of Christianity. The orange line at the bottom is the increase of what we call the nuns. Not the Catholic nuns, but the N-O-N-E-S, right? The nuns, non-affiliates. They don't affiliate with any religion. Now, that should be troubling to us, right? How many of you are troubled by that statistic to see that there is a significant decrease? In 1971, 86% of Australians said that they were Christian. In 2021, only 43% says that they are Christian. If you look there from 2021, it went from 68% to 63%. In 2011, it went to 61%. And then there's a massive 10% jump from 2011 to 2016. And then another almost 10% drop. So this is a very significant downturn in Australian culture where people used to be Christian or used to at least affiliate with Christianity. Now it seems that they don't. And now there's this massive marked increase in those that say they don't believe in anything. So we want to talk about what are the nuns, or who are the nuns, and how are they defined. As with most things in the world, the nuns are a complex cohort. So today I will paint with a broad brush as accurately as I can. How many of you like painting? Right? My wife's a painter. She never paints with a broad brush, right? Because you can't really, unless you're painting a house, right? But normally if you want to paint a beautiful picture, you use kind of very specific brushes to paint certain things. So the reason I mention that is because the data keeps on changing depending on which sociologist you listen to, right? Some are more conservative, some are a bit more liberal, depending on where you go. But I want us to look at the themes that will come out of this, because I think the themes, whether it's Australian, the UK, America, all of them show very similar themes. Some might be further ahead than us, like the UK or Europe, and America's trailing a little bit behind, but catching up rapidly. And we kind of in the middle as Australians. So, firstly, the nuns, they do not come from a specific geographical area or race or religious or political ideology. It's kind of a bit mixed bag. They all come from all walks of life, right? They come in all shapes and sizes. If we look at the census data, you will see that they are not atheists. Those that say that they are atheists in Australia in 2016 were 32,000. In 2021 was 37,000. Now, quickly, what's the population size of Australia? 26 million. 26 million, that's Australians. How big is this population group that say that they are atheists? 37,000. That's a small drop in the bucket, right? Secondly, we have agnostics. So an atheist is somebody that says, I know that there isn't a God. An agnostic is somebody that says, I'm not sure. Right? That went from 26,000 to about 31,000, almost 32,000. The nothing in particular, check this out. They went from 6.9 million, almost 7 million, almost to 10 million from the one census to the another census. So they are massively growing, right? Now there are some key differences between the atheists, the agnostics, and the nothing in particular. The atheists and the agnostics are very similar in thinking and a lot closer aligned than the nuns. Right, the nothing in particular, they are vastly different. Now, if we go out in the world, our neighbors, our friends, the people that we work with, a lot of them will actually resonate with the nuns. It's very rare that you'll actually find an atheist or an agnostic, right? So, the nuns are increasing with the younger generation. More men are atheists and agnostic. The nothing in particular cohort have more women than men. Atheists and agnostics have higher education, and the nothing in particular resonates with all educational levels. So it doesn't mean that they are more educated. Oftentimes the nuns could be less educated, right? Might not even have a university degree, or they might just have a high school diploma, or might not even have that. So it isn't a specific, they went to university, or they've studied, biology and evolution and all of these things that made them. No. There's nothing in particular. There's something else in the cultural air that we breathe that has shifted them away from religion. Now, for us as Christians that are missionaries, this is important. Why? Because we are called to make disciples of all the nations. As missionaries with a missionary spirit, we want to understand the people that we are ministering to. We understand their worldview. We need to understand what are the barriers that they have towards Christianity. Now, just recently, I went to a conference, and the director of the NCLS, Dr. Ruth Powell, she presented the 4 spiritual types of Australians. Now, this is research that she gave, and she basically says that there are 3 groups. There's the spiritual but not religious. They're about 13%. Then you have the religious and spiritual. Those would be most of us, right? They are practicing Christians or practicing individuals that believe that they are religious and spiritual. Then there are moderately religious and spiritual, but they're non-practicing. And then 38% are neither non-religious or non-spiritual, right? And 1% said that they are religious but not spiritual. I don't really understand what that means, right? But essentially, that's the 4 spiritual types that we have. Now, this is what she says here. She says that the religious and spiritual, those are the 28%, they are practicing, they're actively faithful, and they go to church, they give their tithe, they volunteer. Now, here's something interesting. There's a pastor in Melbourne, Mark Sayers, and he's been studying the religious and spiritual as well, and he says that there's a marked decline in giving, in voluntary services. There's a marked decline in church attendance. Most people used to go 2, 3, 4 times a month to church. Most of them go once or twice. Do you see it in your church, where there's a marked decline in people coming to church? I know in my church, Kingscliff Church, we have about 290 to 300 people a week that come to church. But if I count, and we count every week, who's coming to church, if all the individuals that come regularly at least once or twice a month, that are good, regular Seventh-day Adventists, if they came every week, we would have at least 400 to 450 people that come every week. But we have this on this weekend, and we have, now people migrate and they do different things, but there seems to have been a shift where church is not number 1 in life anymore. Church is not the priority anymore. It is a priority maybe, or it is an important thing, but it's not the priority in life anymore. Then there's the moderately religious and spiritual. They're 21% of the population. They believe, but they don't participate much. The spiritual, but not religious. They are drawn to the sacred, but not to church. And then they're neither religious nor spiritual. Now, I want to run through a few of these, specifically the top one. These are the ones that are spiritual and religious. 94% of them say they believe in God, spirit, or a life force. They believe there's a supernatural realm. They also have mystical or supernatural experiences, 41% of them, and 50% say they think it can happen. Then those that are spiritual or kind of modified spiritual and religious, 72% say that they believe in God or believe in some spirit or life force. Only 25% say that they've had a supernatural experience, and 59% say that they think it can happen. So these that are, they identify as spiritual but not religious, but they don't participate in it. Let me ask you this. Do you think that they are naturalists or they have a closed system? So let me explain this kind of idea. There are basically 2 systems in the world, an open system and a closed system. We sometimes refer to it as an open cosmological system or a closed cosmological system. Don't worry about the big words. But an open system just means that we don't believe that it's just the atoms and molecules around. We see there's a supernatural realm. We believe there's a God, there's angels, there's demons, there's various other supernatural entities in the world. Most of us would be people that believe in an open system. There's also those that believe in a closed system. Those are materialists. Those are individuals that believe that there's no supernatural realm. It is only what you see and what you can feel, taste, touch, right? These are closed systems. So just these 2 groups, do you think that they are open or closed? Most of these individuals would be open. Would you agree with me? They believe that there's a God or supernatural force, some life force. They believe that some miracles can happen. They're very open towards it, right? Now let's go to the next one. This is the modified one as well. 77% know somebody who identifies as a Christian. 50%, so these are people that are not practicing. 50% would accept an invitation to church from a close family friend, of a family or a friend. So that means there's a great opportunity here for people that would identify as Christian, identify as religious, they even believe, but they don't attend church, they don't come to church anymore, but they would be very open if you as a friend invited them. Now imagine this individual gets a mail in their mailbox that says there's a religious program at their church. Do you think that they'll attend for that? Probably not. But if you that know them invite them, would they come then? A lot more likely, right? Oftentimes as church, we rely on our programming and our advertisement, but we neglect the greatest power that we have, you and me. Our voices as missionaries of God in our streets, in our neighborhoods, in the places where we find ourselves, in work or school or wherever. That's where we are called to. So when Jesus says, go therefore and make disciples, he is not saying, go pastors, even though they are included, or go Sabbath school leaders, or go evangelistic leaders. He is saying, go everybody that says that I'm a Christian. That includes all of us, right? So here's a great opportunity. We could already just connect with these people that already affiliate a lot more with our kind of thinking, right? Now, the spiritual but not religious, 63% of them believe that there is a God or spirit or a life force, right? So this quite lower than those that say that they are spiritual and religious. But already you can see that 63% is a majority here. So once again, is it a closed or open mindset? Most of them have an open mindset. Most of them believe that there is a supernatural realm there. That means the majority of Australians believe that there is some supernatural realm out there. That is a great thing for mission. So even though we are a secular country, majority of people have some idea that there is a supernatural realm there. There are some conversations that can be had in that space. Once again, 19% of them would accept an invitation to church from close friends or family. Now that's a lot smaller, right? 19% is not a big amount. But how likely do you think that they are to come to a church if they only find some social media post or they just find letterboxing? A lot less likely. If they'll only come, 90% of them will come if they're invited by a friend. It means they probably won't come if they just find some tract in their post box or put in their door, right? Once again, personal effort is exceptionally important. Now, those that are neither, only 21% of them say that they believe in God or life force. But what's interesting is that when you look at the same research from the NCLS, you will see that when COVID hit, a lot of people said, yeah, we started praying. So when life is good, and this is part of the idea of apatheism. Apatheism is this idea that we're apathetic towards religion. There are 4 strands of apatheism, and one of the strands is comfort, and the other strand is distraction. The more comfortable we are and the more distracted we are, the less inclined we are to look for spiritual answers. Because we're comfortable. We're good, right? But when things get difficult, people tend to start looking for answers in some spaces, and they would be open to that. 21% of those that are neither, so higher than the spiritual but not religious, once again would take an invitation from friends or family. Now from this research, this is what was put in the research brief of this research. In 2021, the Australian Community Survey conducted by the NCLS Research provides a far more sophisticated understanding of Australian spirituality than census data alone. These findings reveal striking disconnect between institutional non-affiliation and personal spiritual engagement. A substantial portion of those who reject spiritual labels in the census maintain active spiritual lives. What does that mean? It means that people are not keen on spiritual institution or religious institutions, but they are spiritual of themselves. This suggests that the rise of the nuns represent not the death of spirituality, but its liberation from institutional constraints. So as we see that graph declining, as we see Christianity is declining, that doesn't mean that people are moving away from God, away from spirituality. It means that they are just untethering themselves from religious institutions. Now, what does that mean for us as missionaries, and especially for us that is involved in a very structured, very organized church? That people are probably a lot less likely to merely come to programs, right? It means that people aren't just going to rock up. We need to go to them. People have some baggage towards institutions, and so that means that there needs to be a deeper onus on us to say, hey, God has called me to go there for, and I need to go there for. I can't wait for my church to run a program. Now, you can invite them to church programs. That's great. But it doesn't start there. That's down the track. The most important thing is, how do we learn as missionaries how to connect with these individuals? Now, that was the NCLS data. I'm going to give you some other data now from a different group, and you'll see some changes here. So this is from the McCrindle group in 2022, so quite recent. And you can Google this, the changing of faith landscape in Australia. They looked at the changing shifts in the landscape here. And the key thing here is that younger Australians are leading the way to a renewed spiritual renewal or search, right? So if you look at the builders there, that's an older generation. 16% of them said that they had spiritual conversations in the last month. 31% that they thought about the meaning of life. 23% thought about God. 20% said that they prayed. And 9% said that they read their Bible. Let's go to Gen Y. That's the millennials. Those are like 45 down. 35% of them said that they had spiritual conversations. 58% said that they thought about the meaning of life. 40% thought about God. 33% prayed. And 26% read their Bible. Now, Gen Z, that's 24 years and younger. These are the young kids. These are high school and university students. 41%, that's the highest of every generation demographic in Australia. 41% said that they had spiritual conversations. 75% of them said that we want to talk about spiritual stuff online, right? 61% of them thought about the meaning of life. 44% thought about God, 39% spoke about prayer, and 32% read their Bible. It means that there is a shift happening now with our younger generations that is inclining them to more spiritual things. They are a lot more open. They have actually been coined by the Barna Research Group as the open generation. We have a great opportunity. When you look at that graph, a few years ago when I looked at that graph, that Christianity is declining, I thought, oh man, we are becoming more secular. It's becoming more difficult to reach out to people. They don't care about spirituality. That's not the case. Our younger generations are becoming more open. Now, when I say more open, it doesn't necessarily mean open to Christianity only. They are open to all options, right? And so that is an important caveat there. Another research that I want to mention is the Australian Generation Z study done by the Australian Research Council. And this is what they said. They said 52% of Australian teens, so 13 to 18, do not identify with any religion. That's a big group, right? Only 37% believe in God. So they're like, oh, we don't know if we believe in God. And this is one of the remarkable things about Australia in general, but also with this younger generation. We don't like labels. And this is why sociological research is so difficult in Australia, because people, they kind of flop around a little bit. We don't believe in God, but I'm open to listen if there is a God. And maybe I'll try something out, right? We don't like labels, and it's very difficult to kind of put people into boxes, right? So they don't believe in God. This confirms a generational acceleration and disaffiliation, meaning moving away from institutions, compared to older Australians. So that means older Australians are a lot easier or a lot more inclined to say, we are Christian. That doesn't mean that they're practicing Christians, right? Younger generations would say, don't put a label on me, but I'm very keen to maybe go to church, maybe listen to what you have to say, maybe listen to a Christian podcast, maybe listen to some Christian music, maybe even read the Bible, but I'm also open to Judaism. I'm also open to paganism. I'm also they're open to a lot of things, right? So religion is no longer the default identity marker for young Australians. Even cultural residue of Christianity is eroding, right? That's like they would go to Christmas, to church, or they go to a Easter service. Or they don't really know about that anymore. Religious practice, 58% of teens never attended a worship service. So they're not used to going to church. Now, once again, think about this. You want to reach out to the younger generation, and you say, hey, would you come to, a nephew, a niece, a neighbor, or somebody, and you say, hey, come to church with me. 58% of them have never been to church, and then they come to church, and now they sit down. Do they know what's going on? Is your church a warm church that can explain stuff? Hey, today we're going to take up the offering. The offering goes for X, Y, Z. Today we're going to pray, and this is the reason why we kneel down. Like explaining certain things. Or do we do church for people that already know the language and already know the rituals and already know what's going on? And so people that have never been there, do they feel welcome? Do they know what's going on? Or do they feel isolated and ostracized because this is not my club? Right? So we need to rethink the way that we do our programs, the way that we do our evangelism, are we doing it in a way that we are relational and connecting with people that are not Christian? Let's be honest, this is difficult for some of us. This is very difficult for me. I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist. The only thing I've ever known is to grow up in this church. There's Dave Spencer. He was my pastor for many years. He was my conference president, my union president, right? I have only known Seventh-day Adventism. I don't know what it means like to be an atheist. I don't know what it means like to not go to church. So to think like them is very difficult for some of us, but we have to do it. One, because they are not believers, because they are going to be lost if they don't connect with Jesus. And two, they are open, they want to learn. How do we bring them there? How can we be hospitable? So the way that we do our church services, if they come, would they understand what is going on? Even cultural practices like Christmas attendance are in decline, particularly in historical denominations like Anglican, Catholic, and Uniting. The decline is not only cognitive, meaning belief, but also embodied practice habit. They don't know. Previous people might not have believed, but they still understood what it means to go to church and to do this. They had an understanding. But the younger generations, they have very little of this. So religion is losing its cultural stickiness. Now, here's something interesting. You remember that about 38% of them said that they don't believe that there is a God. But look at the alternative spiritualities. 50% of them believe in karma. 29% believe in reincarnation. 31% believe in ghosts. 25% communicate with the dead. 20% believe in astrology of UFOs. So even though they don't believe, they're not sure. They're not hard atheists that said, I know for a fact. They're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that there is a God. But they're very open. Rather than becoming strictly atheistic, Gen Z is exploring eclectic, remixed spiritualities. Often borrowed from Asian traditions or pop culture, spirituality is increasingly consumer-driven, intuitive, and self-styled. So attitudes towards religion. Teens are not necessarily hostile, but they are indifferent to traditional institutions. Many are open to non-material possibilities, even if they reject organized religion. They are unwilling to be loyal to older ways of doing things. Now, let me ask you this. How stuck in your ways are you at your local church? How hierarchical are we as a people group that this is the way that we need to do it? Now, like I said, there are certain things that we cannot change. The gospel is the gospel is the gospel. We don't change the gospel. But there are certain things that we can tweak. There are certain things that we can change. We're like, that's not the gospel, right? There's certain things that we're like, yeah, we could probably change that to accommodate people. There's certain things that we do that is accommodating to us. For instance, we go to church at 9:30 at church in the mornings, right? 9:30. Where in the Bible you read you need to go to church at 9:30 in the morning? Nowhere, right? That's just something that grew up in our culture, right? Something that they started. Now, I've been told this. I have not actually verified this, but I've been told this, that the reason for that is because back in the day, the farmers needed to go and, milk their cows and do all of their stuff before they could go to church, right? So there was a practicality around why we started church at 9:30. But this is not a gospel thing. If you wanted to do church in the afternoon, you could probably do that, right? But if I say to you, well, you have to preach something different on a Sabbath morning. You don't preach that Jesus is God. You preach that there's every way to God. Whoa. That's different. Christ is very sure. The gospel is very, very clear. There's only one way to salvation. That is Jesus Christ, right? So there are certain things that we can change and certain things that we shouldn't, right? So we need to understand these things. How open are we to change individually, structurally, in order to reach our people? Gen Z displays what Charles Taylor is a Christian sociologist, one of the key thinkers or seminal thinkers in secular thinking, and what he calls the Nova effect. The Nova effect. He was one of the first thinkers that worked against or posited against what we call the secularization theory. The secularization theory, in a nutshell, essentially says this: as we move and as we get better and stronger and advance as a human race, people will decline in religion. Why? Because religion doesn't make any any sense. Religion is like for old people that didn't understand the world, right? It's an archaic thing. So as we realize, the thunder is not because of the god of thunder throwing something down. It's just because of the atmospheric pressures, and so that is not a god of thunder anymore, right? As we start to learn more about science and all of these things, we will start to realize that religion was a crutch. But this sociologist says, no. Spirituality is something that is there because in us, there's a hunger in us. And he speaks about this Nova effect, that we live with this cross pressure of faith and belief. I don't like the terminology that he uses, but the terminology he says is that there's this constant haunting of the divine, the haunting of the transcendent. We would say it's the Holy Spirit drawing people. It's like somehow, as human beings, we cannot let go of the divine. Why? Because the divine doesn't let go of us. And so whether you're an atheist, whether you're an agnostic, whether you're an apatheist, whether you're a Christian, whether you're spiritual but not religious, no matter who you are, we know that by God's prevenient grace, He draws us constantly to Him. That means that your neighbor, your friend, your nephew, your son, your daughter, the person that isn't in church anymore, God is more at work in their life than you can even think or imagine. That when you say, as a missionary, I want to reach out to them, you are not saying, okay, God, let's do something here. No. You should say, God, I know you're already doing something here. How can I help? How can you use me in this endeavor? Because I know that you're already there, right? And so we live in this Nova effect. We live in this place where we know that God is still drawing people in. Andrew Singleton, who comments on that, who's the main professor of that study, says this: younger Australians, teenagers especially, are at the forefront of religious change in this country. This is in 2023, right? So he's saying, when we look at the census data of 2021, where there's a decrease, and we look at research now, it seems as if something is happening in the world. There is a change that is happening, and the young people are at the forefront of this. For the most part, they don't believe or belong in the same way as members of older generations, but the majority of them do not see themselves as belonging to a religious tradition or organization. Churches used to bank on Christmas as being the main time when people would feel obligated to come along, but that tradition is in grave danger, especially in traditional denominations like Anglican, Uniting, and Catholic churches. Teens are less likely than ever before to be familiar with that Christian tradition. Though this drift from the church doesn't mean that teens are becoming a generation of atheists or rejecting spirituality. Certainly, belief in God is declining among members of the younger generation, but a lot still believe in a higher being or life force or are just unsure. Most of those teens don't identify as Buddhist or Hindus, but their interest in those beliefs is evidence of a changing spiritual landscape among teens. So what is he saying? He's saying they're not saying that they're Hindus, they're not saying that they're Christian, they're not saying that they're Buddhist, but somehow they're taking some stuff from Christianity, some stuff from Buddhism, some stuff from Hinduism. They're grabbing all of these things. And this is what we mean by remixed spirituality. Remixed spirituality essentially says, I am the captain of my own ship, so I can grab whatever I feel will help me in my spiritual journey. And essentially, that is the most difficult thing that we have to contend with. How do we engage? Secularization is not the diminishing of belief, it's the multiplication of belief. What does that mean? 500 years ago, in medieval Germany, people believed one thing. All of them were Christian, right? You went to Switzerland, all of them were Christian. Everybody believed in whatever the Catholic or Protestant church that they were in believed, right? But today, because of the proliferation of beliefs, now everybody has their truth. My truth is my truth. And my spiritual journey is my spiritual journey. So now, instead of having a belief system, every person has their own belief system. So your neighbor on your left might believe completely different than your neighbor on the right. And both of them might say that they are spiritual. So as missionaries, how do we get to minister to them? We need to learn those skill sets of true missionaries, of saying, these individuals don't think and act like me. They look like me maybe, they talk like me maybe, they've gone to the same schools as me maybe, but their perspective on spirituality might be different. So one of the best ways to do it is to sit down and have a conversation with them. Invite them over for lunch, invite them over, get to know them, minister to them. One of the things that we'll speak about this week that I think that we have severely misunderstood and forgotten is the idea of Christ's method alone. And one of the key things of Christ's method alone is relational, incarnational ministry. Connecting with people one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball, sitting next to them, looking them in the face, talking to them, engaging with them, trying to understand where they're coming from. What are their barriers? What are the things that they are struggling with? And so in many ways, the call for us by Jesus to go therefore and make disciples is essentially a call to become like God. And as we go, we become more like Him. That's the beauty of it. We are transformed into His image as we act like Him, as we go and make disciples. We are discipled in the process of making disciples. And the way that we do that is by, number one, humbling ourselves and saying, I don't know everything about you. I don't know why you don't believe. I don't know. I'm going to put my ideas aside. I'm going to put my stories aside of why I think that you don't believe. And I'm going to listen to you and say, tell me, why don't you believe? What is your hesitancy? You seem spiritual. You seem like you enjoy yoga. You seem like you enjoy this Eastern mysticism stuff, but somehow you still have this reservation against Christianity or the church. Why is that? And not to engage in a negative conversation or argument with him, but to truly understand him. I mean, this is incarnational ministry at the best, right? If you think about God Himself, He humbled Himself. He took the form of a servant. He came in the likeness of man. He didn't come with His transcendent glory and power and might. He came as one of us and spoke our language, sat with us and ate with us. When we open the Holy Scriptures, it is words, God's word in human word. Ellen White is very clear in The Great Controversy. She says that the Bible is written in human words so that we can understand it. It's like God telling a children's story to us. He can't communicate in His level. He needs to come down to our level. And so as missionaries, that's the spirit that we want to have as well. He continues, he says, the idea of karma has become a kind of semi-mystical shorthand of what goes around comes around in this life. Teens live in a diverse, complicated world, not that many are willing to shut the door completely to the non-material possibilities. Just don't expect them to be loyal to older ways of doing things. How many of you see this today? Young people are not loyal to your church. They are not, right? If there's another program at another church or another thing happening, they'll go there. One week you can have 50 people at your church, young people, and the next weekend they're all gone. You're like, where are they? Right? You ask them at a nominating committee. How many of you have struggled at a nominating committee to get any of your young people to commit to anything? Right? These are all evidences of something that has changed in the air that we breathe, and that's what we want to unpack. Now, to continue a little bit more, just to kind of give you the picture, the Barna Research Group has labeled this group the open generation. This is not Andrew Singleton, this is Barna Group. They say this global research on teenagers. So they went all over the world. They did 100 countries that they did research on. And this one is just on Australia, but on all of it, it seems very similar. They say the global research on teenagers shows that overall this generation is open and inclusive, seeking truth, authenticity, and change. Interconnected and optimistic, today's teens represent and welcome different perspectives, different faiths, and different cultures. They are deeply passionate about addressing injustice in our world. Given all of this, there is a current curiosity about Jesus and the Bible and how they connect to the purpose and pain of everyday people. So, on one hand, we have a great opportunity that young people want to hear. More people are open to spirituality. And as I engage with people, I don't know about you, but I see it's not only young people, more people are open to spirituality, which put a lot of, not pressure on us, but it puts a bit of responsibility on us to be like, when we communicate the gospel, we can't just do what we've always done. We need to make sure that the way that we communicate the gospel is something that resonates with them. And I think the gospel can do that. Here's some more statistics that you can see there. As people are growing, this is in the US, more people are following Jesus, right? You see there 2021, only 54%, and then in 2025, 66%. Here again, if you look at the statistics there, Gen Z is leading the pack, then it is millennials, Gen X, and boomers. And constantly, as you can see this, I'm just going through this very quickly, openness is rising. This is not just something that is happening in Australia. It's not just happening in America. Here you can see Gen Z 59%, millennials 54%, Gen X 43%, and boomers 34%, right? These are individuals that are more open to God since the pandemic. So in Australia, you're seeing this. You're seeing this in America. And you're even seeing it in one of the hardest places to reach in the world, the UK. Recently, the UK, in the beginning of this year, brought out the Quiet Revival. Did anybody hear about this, the Quiet Revival? Has anybody heard about the Quiet Revival? So this is from the Bible Society in the UK, one of the most secular places, most difficult places to reach. And they came out and they say, man, something is changing. Check this out. Bible reading by age. At least weekly, 80% of people that are Christian, of the 18 to 34%, are reading their Bible. So these are just Christians, right? And this has changed from those that went from monthly, right? So you can see a massive change with the young people starting to read their Bible, right? If you talk about who's in church today, you'll see that this is in the UK. In 2018, over 65s were 14%. In 2025, 19%. So 5% increase. Look at the under 35s. They went from 4% to 16% are joining church. So it seems like something is happening in the world, in Australia, in America, in the UK, in various places. There seems to be a change that is happening where people are a lot more open to spirituality. Now, the Pew Research did an interesting research where they spoke to those that say that they are religious and spiritual, or open to spirituality. And then they asked the same questions to people that are not religiously affiliated. They don't want anything to do with religion, but they are open to spiritual things. Now, if I had to ask you, what is the most important thing for you in your spiritual journey? What would you say? God, right? Your relationship with God. That kind of doesn't even need explanation. It's like the most important thing in spirituality is God, right? You're spiritual because you want to connect with the divine. So they asked him, what does it mean? So they say to him, these are 10 things, 10 kind of statements. You need to order them from the most important to the least important. So those that are religiously affiliated, they said being connected with God is number one, being connected with something bigger than myself, being connected with my true self, being open-minded, following a religious faith. Like those things are important to those that are religious. Now, I want you to see this because this is very important. For those that are nuns, what is the most important thing for them? Self. Where is God in the equation? Number 7. Number 7. What does that mean? What we are seeing from the research is that the decline of religious institutions, that is happening. That doesn't mean atheism. It means that there's something still happening spiritual in terms of spirituality, right? That's a reality. But when we say spirituality, it's not necessarily the same spirituality that you and I have in mind. Because most of us would have spirituality as connecting with God. But for a lot of people, being spiritual does not mean connect to God. It means how can I find my journey to my self-actualization? How can I find the best way that will serve me? And God is but a commodity to be used in that process. That means self is at the center of the spirituality, not God. Now, as missionaries, once again, this is an important puzzle piece because as we engage with people, we need to know that the self is very important to them, as it is to all of us. But when we start talking about spirituality, we need to understand, but for them, they want meaning and beauty and purpose before they have truth. Meaning that when we engage with them, when we are trying to be missionaries, we cannot say, but God said, and therefore you must follow, because they don't really care. God is something to be used, not something to be followed. So there's a journey to be had to understand where they're coming through. In conclusion, I want to mention this book, Strange Rites, by Tara Isabella Burton. And she speaks about the idea of this new religion for a godless world. This will summarize kind of all of the threads that I've pulled out in this talk so far. Tim Shervin says that this is the most thoughtful analysis of the current spiritual crisis anywhere, and I think that is correct. She's really good at kind of summarizing things. She says this, and this is she's writing to America specifically, but I think that the themes of any secular country, this would resonate with us. We do not live in a godless world. When we look at that there's a decline in religion, there's a decline in spiritual and Christianity affiliation, that is true. But that does not mean godlessness. So one of the things I want you to remember is that we are called to be missionaries to a secular world. A secular world is not a godless world. A secular world is not a godless world. There might be atheists there, yes, there might be some godless people there, but overwhelmingly the majority are not godless. Rather, we live in a profoundly anti-institutional one, where the proliferation of the internet, creative culture, and consumerist capitalism have rendered us all simultaneously the parishioner, the high priest, and the deity. What is she saying? Self is at the center. I want to be the one that worships, but I also want the one that mediates the worship. I also want to be the one that's at the center of the worship. God is not at the center of the worship for many of these people that are saying that they are spiritual, but not religious. She continues, she says, America is not secular, but simply spiritually self-focused. No less than the rise of Protestantism, which was inseparable from the invention of the printing press and the spread of mass literacy. This shift is deeply rooted in technological changes of the 21st century. What is she saying? She's saying that Protestantism grew and became so dominant because of the printing press. This new spirituality is linked to what? To our cell phones, right? To the internet. It is the catalyst for it. Anti-institutional, intuitional self-divination is at the heart the natural spirituality of the internet and smartphone culture. So as missionaries that are supposed to go and disciple and teach people and share the gospel to them, we need to know that the God that they are worshiping in their spiritual journey is often themselves. So how do we engage with him? How do we engage with him? Very, very similar to my daughter. She was about 1.5 years here. And if you look there, can you see how much handlebar I have? As we were cycling, she would constantly try and hit my hand off the cycling wheel. She's 1.5 years. She couldn't even walk at this time, but she didn't want me to hold on to the handlebars. That's where we are now in the spiritual journey of most people. They want to hold on to the handlebars. They don't want God to have the handlebars. But we know this. If God is not there, we will lead to destruction, right? Today's remix reject authority, institution, creed, and moral universalism. They value intuition, personal feeling, and experiences. They demand to rewrite their own scripts about how the universe and human beings operate. Shaped by the twin forces of creative, communicative internet and consumer capitalism, today's remix don't just want to receive doctrine, to assent automatically to a creed. They want to choose, and more often than not purchase, the spiritual path that feels more authentic, more meaningful to them. They prioritize intuitional spirituality over institutional religion. And they want, when available institutional options fail to suit their needs, the freedom to mix and match, to create their own rituals and practices and belief systems. A religion decoupled from institutions, from creeds, from metaphysical truth claims about God or the universe or the way things are, but are still seeks in various and varying ways to provide us with the pillars of what religion has always has: meaning, purpose, community, and ritual. So what is she saying here? She's saying that at the heart, people are still seeking for the same things, but they are blinded, as Paul says, by the gods of this world. What are the gods of this world? The autonomous self. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want, right? And so somehow we are missionaries in a pagan world. They might say that they are spiritual, but their spirituality revolves around them. This is not only happening outside of the church, but even inside of the church. Mark Sayers, as I've mentioned earlier, said this: there is a disappearance of a mode of church engagement characterized by commitment, resilience, and sacrifice amongst many Western believers. In its place, a new mode of disengaged Christian faith and church interaction is emerging. This new mode is characterized by sporadic engagement, passivity, commitment phobia, and a consumerist framework. Inside and outside of the church, there's stuff that has shifted in the spiritual landscape. And as faithful Christians, as faithful missionaries, we need to know what it is in order to engage with it deeply and meaningfully. And so tomorrow, we are going to engage with that kind of question. Why is this going on? Then on the third session, we're going to talk about this idea of Scripture and look at the Bible deeply, the meta-narrative of Scripture, the Bible story, and see what Christ has called us to as missionaries. And I think you're going to really love the idea that Christ brings out when he says that I have called you. And then fourthly, the fourth seminar, we will have some practical ways of how we can engage with our neighbors, with our friends and people around us. Some biblical application of how we can do that. So today we looked at what is going on. Tomorrow we will look at why it's going on. And then we will start looking at the normative tasks of Scripture and how we can relate that to our friends. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you tomorrow again. Before we go, let's just pray together. Gracious Father, we come to you, Lord. And Lord, I know that this was maybe a lot to process, a lot to go through. But the reality is, Lord, that you are not done with this world yet. That your Spirit is still drawing people in, and our younger people, Lord, they seem to be more attuned in some way to the spiritual calling that you have for them. But unfortunately, Lord, we know that the devil is also like a roaring lion going out trying to take them down or divert or distract them. And so I pray, Lord, that you would help us as missionaries to be wise and discerning, winsome in our work to reach people for the gospel. May we co-labor with you, Lord, in reaching the people in our street, in our neighborhoods, in our families, Lord, for your kingdom. Give us wisdom and discernment. Help us to understand. Bless us now in Jesus' name. Amen.